We all have that one game that we grew up with, and it's just pages full of nostalgia. Every time you hear the music to that game or see screenshots or really hear people talking about it, it makes you smile because it really resonates with you as a game that you grew up with. It was part of your identity growing up. It was something that you could always recall from the good times of your childhood. It was always something special and near and dear to your heart, but it was also something that you knew you would never quite ever see again, especially many years in the future. Well, that game that I'm describing for me was Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. It was also a game that I never thought I would ever see again. It was something so special and so unique I never thought it would be replicated, especially with the modern era of Paper Mario, where it seemed like Nintendo just did not want to change back to what made Paper Mario so good in the first place. What I fell in love with so long ago, it felt like a fantasy, and it felt like something that I would just never be able to feel again. But in the year of 2023, at the end of a September Nintendo Direct, Nintendo would shock the world and bring back a game not only that people love, but a game that some people consider one of Nintendo's greatest of their entire collection. On May 23rd, after 20 long years from its original release on the GameCube, Nintendo would bring back Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door in a beautiful from the ground up remake. That's right, today we are talking about Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Remake for Nintendo Switch. Look, I know how much I love this game, and of course, I'm going to be completely honest when I break through this entirety of the game. I am talking about every single aspect there is to talk about. I never really wanted to do reviews before because I feel like reviewers never did a game justice, really digging in deep and giving every single detail and opinion about everything the game has to offer. And that's exactly what I want to do with this video. Going from the very beginning to the very end of the game, I'm talking about everything. So if you haven't completed this game, you probably don't want to watch this video. Yes, nothing is being left unturned, and we are talking about everything, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly, about Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Now, you might be wondering, why is this game so important? And why is 2024 better than ever to see this game actually return to the light? Well, it's mostly because of the current state of Paper Mario. Obviously, after Sticker Star, things started to take a downhill approach with how Paper Mario was actually being made. Nintendo wanted to always evolve the game, and that meant changing the battle system, but also changing the characters and partners and pretty much everything around the world of Paper Mario. Over the last couple of years, it's really been stripping the soul of what made Paper Mario so great in the first place, really just making the series more bland than ever. And fans had been begging Nintendo to finally go back to the old ways, and what better way to do so than to go back to what made the games so fun in the first place, and going back to one of the fan favorites being Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. This is so huge for Paper Mario fans, and it's seen amongst the community as a gigantic win, because finally Nintendo listened, and not only did they give us this great game again, but they did above and beyond. Not too often Nintendo really does something like this for one of their past games, and the fact that they did it with Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door could not make me any happier. I mean, not only are the graphics greatly improved, but the music is all completely remixed, there's added music, and even added things in this game to make it the full-fledged Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door experience that maybe we even wish we had back then. Yes, I'm saying it right now, this game is a major improvement from that of the original, which already was a stellar experience. But Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is not perfect. Of course, really nothing is. But yes, there will be problems that I need to talk about with this game, but at the end of the day, it's my job to go through this game and dissect everything and explain how I feel about every chapter, every character, every battle, every boss, every story element, every piece of music that I possibly can. Buckle up, get in your seats, get yourself a snack, and recline, because this is going to be a long video. And of course, with this video being so long, it took me a very long time to make. So make sure you do your part, leave a like, and subscribe to be very supportive of videos like this. I actually just made one of Tears of the Kingdom. If you guys want to check that out, it will actually be in a playlist for my own reviews. I'm going to start reviewing some older games and pretty much any game that comes out like this from now on, being a full 100% review. But enough blabbering and yapping, it's time to get into the full review of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is loved by fans for many things, but one of those things for sure is the story that it offers. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is filled with rich story lore, and each chapter having its own individual story that ties into the whole thing. And let's face it, it's a Mario game. Now, you're not getting anything super deep that ties in multiple different games in a timeline, all Zelda style, but it definitely does have something that you're not expecting as far as Mario games give us in the past. Normally, it's rescue Peach, you're done. Yes, you have to rescue Peach again in this game, but the story goes a lot deeper than just Bowser or Peach or even Mario himself, but takes us to a brand new world with brand new characters and a brand new story to dive through. The story tells us of a town from the old days, and a kingdom that was once very prosperous but fell to ruins for some reason. Then we learn that people gathered and made a new port town here, and all the stories of the ruins and everything that once was begin to fold into fairy tale. But deep beneath the ground lied an ancient city, and also rumors of a very special, magnificent treasure that was hidden behind a giant sealed door. And of course, our nosy Princess Peach has to go investigate for herself and see exactly what's going on. This is the town of Rogueport. I guess you can say she was technically on vacation. I mean, clearly we've seen how that goes for Mario and Princess Peach, but she takes another one, and this time she decides to go here, of all places. A mysterious figure then tricks her into opening up a box because only the purest of hearts can open up this treasure chest in order to get a treasure map that then leads to the crystal stars, which in turn open up the giant sealed door, which then could lead you to that giant treasure. Peach then opens the box in order to find the mystical treasure chest and actually ends up sending it to Mario in order to have him do all the dirty work while she gets kidnapped. But Mario takes the map for himself and sets off to Rogueport to find out exactly what's going on and meet up with Princess Peach. The story starts off pretty simple. Mario arrives at Rogueport, makes friends with a Goomba scholar at a university. I mean, this game already has more diversity in the first 10 minutes than the entirety of Sticker Star, but then ends up going on a grand adventure to find all the crystal stars, rescue Princess Peach from her new alien kidnappers who are also after the crystal stars for some reason, and also get them before Bowser as well. Yep, everybody's after these things because something behind this door is worth all of this trouble, and everyone's trying to figure out what type of power lies behind it. So thanks to Princess Peach and his new handy dandy map, he can now find all the locations to the crystal stars scattered across the new land, and he can actually find each new star by collecting one, as every single one he gets will show him access to the next one on the map. So it's a pretty basic story. We've seen stuff like this before where Mario goes from world to world collecting something until he gets to the very end, but I promise the story and the individual stories get a lot more interesting. Before we even dive into the chapters of this game, Rogueport itself, being the new hub world of this game, is so incredibly satisfying. I mean, seriously, every single detail down to the little paper scraps on the floor and the giant puddles and trash laid out everywhere and the interesting NPCs that are walking about in their different various hats and costumes seriously just screams originality. There's so many characters in this one hub world that have their own little lore going around, and you can actually pay some of them to give you deeper lore about the story that you're actually unfolding for yourself. And it's awesome. There's some extra key story points that really drive home what's going on, and it feels like you are a part of something a lot bigger than just the Mushroom Kingdom for once. As personally, it's not the funniest Paper Mario game to me, but it still is one that's rich with humor and actually has still some lines that still made the remade cut that make me kind of laugh out loud in certain situations that I can't believe the Nintendo team still allowed to be part of the script. How many Mario games are going to allow you to get mugged by a thief in the middle of the street where he takes your coins and you can actually track him down into his back alley and beat him to a pulp to take the coins back? I'm like, come on. Rogueport has never felt more alive, and the story and all the dialogue feels even more serious and interesting this time around thanks to the new character animations. I mean, literally every NPC and even partner character and Mario himself has like over 5 brand new expressions, and it's just so interesting to see them actually show emotion when they're speaking on certain things, and it ties into the story, the lore, and the character's involvement in the situation a lot better. But now I want to go through each chapter, and we're going to be doing this a lot for this video, and right now we're just focusing on the story from each chapter, and starting off with chapter 1, it's a pretty basic story, but it's already so much better than most of the modern Paper Mario stories that we've had for each chapter. It's a classic castle and dragon story, very Hobbit style, with bad dragon terrorizes town and Mario must stop him. And there's a deeper story that goes with Mario's new partner character that he finds with Koops, who not only has to leave his beloved girlfriend behind, but also has to go out and venture to try to find his lost dad that actually went to the castle many years ago in order to stop Hooktail but never returned, until finally you make your way up there, find Hooktail's weakness, and actually take out Hooktail, and saving Koops' dad in the process. It's a really cool chapter that ties in characters and this crazy story with this dragon, and I really did enjoy it, even for it being relatively simple, but it is chapter 1 after all. Chapter 2 takes a step back even more, and it's not that deep of a story whatsoever. Overall, you're pretty much just going all Pikmin style and helping these little creatures in their beloved tree called the Punies. Your job is to help free the rest of the Punies that have been imprisoned by the X-Nauts in the tree, because the X-Nauts found out that there was a crystal star being held here. Not only are you helping out the Punies, but you also have to help them take out their rival clan, being the Jabbies. And that's really as far as the story goes. You're just going around and helping out different Punies and saving them from their imprisonment until eventually you have enough for them to all help lead you to the crystal star, and you can take out Lord Crump, leader of the X-Naut army. Once again, this chapter was a little light in story compared to the rest, but not every single chapter needs a super deep story to follow. Chapter 3, however, is where things really start to ramp up with the story, and I absolutely love not only this chapter, but the story that was told here. You learn of a crystal star being held here, which is the third crystal star you're looking for, and apparently it's being used as a championship belt, and in order for Mario to receive this belt, he initially has to climb the ranks in this wrestling league, where he has to start from the very bottom in the minor leagues and work his way all the way up to a title match against Rock Hawk, which is the current champion of the Glitz Pit. So Mario will actually go through what seems to be an American wrestling league, working his way up the ranks, going from different locker rooms, talking to different fighters, but something is also going on in the background. You'll start hearing rumors of fighters disappearing and just weird things happening, and Mario getting strange emails from some anonymous source that seems to be guiding him through some type of clues, like a detective, trying to show him that there's a bigger threat going on besides just this wrestling league. And every now and then you would get an email telling Mario to go explore the back rooms or the closets of this giant wrestling league in order to find more information about what's going on. Not only are you constantly battling in this wrestling league, but you're also trying to solve some mystery in the background. The real culprit of the story actually locks Mario in his locker room before his championship battle against Rock Hawk, and Mario finally makes a way out and is able to defeat Rock Hawk to be the reigning champion, and gets his crystal star, which is not a real one. It's a fake, and it's a prop used for a championship trophy for this league. Mario then goes into some more deductive reasoning and research in order to find out the true culprit of this whole thing, being the leader of the Glitz Pit, the one that runs the whole show, Grubba, who actually has been taking out fighters this entire time and doing some shady stuff in the background. And the one that's been emailing you and giving you information was his first-hand assistant, being Jolene, because Jolene's brother, Prince Mush, was actually the best fighter at the Glitz Pit back then, but mysteriously disappeared one day, and she knew all along that it was Grubba, as she caught an eye at his super machine that was powered by the real crystal star in order to transform him into Macho Grubba. And knowing this, she knew that she was not powerful enough to defeat him, so she waited until someone would visit the Glitz Pit that could give her a chance at taking him out, and when she saw eyes on Mario and his partners, she knew that they were the ones that could take him out, so she led Mario on this wild goose chase in order to take out this corrupt arena leader. This is so crazy. The story is amazing. Mario takes out Macho Grubba and saves Prince Mush and brings him back to life thanks to the power of the Crystal Star. It's a pretty deep, dark, twisted story with an amazing chapter gameplay alongside of it, making for me one of the best moments in a Paper Mario game. And would you believe me if I told you the next chapter gets even better? With chapter 4, it's a very sad tale of a civilization in Twilight Town that all the people in this already glooming looking town is being turned into pigs at random. Yes, in the town, if you hear the bell ring, someone in the town is being turned into a pig, which is very sad. You can talk to the NPCs and learn about their individual stories and how their husbands and wives and kids are being turned into pigs, and it's truly heartbreaking, and you really feel for the people of the town, and they don't know why this is happening out of nowhere. And it's your job to go find the source of this bell and who's turning everybody into pigs in the first place, which leads you through some really creepy valleys and wooded areas until eventually reaching the creepy steeple where the source of the bell ring is coming from. Once you get to the top of the steeple, you'll find a weird ghostly creature named Dupless who's actually been doing this simply for fun. Yes, he's having fun turning civilians into pigs. You battle him and you think you won a completely easy and short chapter until you find out something's not quite right. Mario leaves with his partners, but a shadow version of Mario lays on the floor after being duplicated by Dupless, and you think that this is Dupless, but it's not. It's you. Dupless has actually done some crazy manipulation where he actually turned into Mario and took Mario's partners, leaving Mario as a husk of his former self, just a purple shadow. Mario runs into Dupless that looks like Mario once again and has to keep battling him over and over until he can actually deal damage, but he can't deal damage until a curse is broken, which is learning his actual name, and you don't find out Dupless's name until doing some more investigation, but this investigation can't happen without the help of a unlikely ally in the form of Vivian, which is one of the 3 Shadow Sirens, and she is constantly getting bullied by her older sisters, being Beldam and Miriam, where they constantly bully her based on the way that she acts and based on the way that she dresses. Thanks to the remake, there's new dialogue that heavily implies that Vivian is actually trans in this game, which actually was originally written for the character in the Japanese version. After constantly being put down by her older sisters and left to find a bomb that's been hidden in one of the nearby bushes, Mario actually comes to help her, and she immediately falls in love with Mario and wants to join him on his adventure. And she joins him and helps him all the way back to the creepy steeple to hide underneath Dupless's parrot and listen to the rambling of the parrot that actually gives them the name of the ghost being Dupless, which technically gives you the letter P, which is funny because if you already go into this game knowing his name, you can't just put it down. You have to go get that letter P. But after learning his name, Dupless flings back to his castle, and you have to go all the way back up to the creepy steeple in order to fight him once again with Vivian. But Vivian actually finds out through this that this is actually the real Mario that she's helping, and she is not sure about this after her main mission and goal is to take Mario out and find crystal stars for the X-Knots. And learning this, she goes away and leaves Mario alone in battle until initially once again having a change of heart, coming back and telling Mario that he's the only person that believed in her and helped her in her time of need. She no longer cared what her sisters said. She's gonna help Mario to the end. And Mario and Vivian are able to take out Mario's partners and Dupless, and of course everyone's in a pure shock when they see Dupless transform back into his ghostly figure. Dupless then runs out of the steeple and the day is saved, granting them the 4th crystal star. This story was so incredible. Of course, everybody in the town turning back into their normal selves after the whole pig transformation thing. This was a really sad and confusing and strange story and constantly kept me on my toes to figure out what was going to happen next. I remember as a kid just being in awe with how the story played out, and being able to fight my own partners that I've collected up to this point was really a strange and unique thing that I never expect to happen. This is easily one of the best stories within the entirety of the game, and it just shows that individual stories that tie into the whole overarching story really help to make a Paper Mario game feel like a Paper Mario game. After 2 incredible chapter stories in a row, Chapter 5 definitely takes a step back and is a more lighthearted, fun pirate journey to a mysterious island where you're washed up with the crew and you have to find a way off this thing and also collect the crystal star. Now, the biggest and deepest part of this story is actually your new partner being Admiral Bobbery, who actually was an old sea captain, but as he was out at sea one day, his wife was actually homesick and actually passed away. So he told himself that he would never go back out to sea ever again because of this, and Mario was thankfully able to convince him by giving him a letter from his wife that she wrote to him before her passing, and told him pretty much to not beat himself up over her passing, and that he shouldn't give away his passion because of that, and that he should get back out to the seas. And he actually does just that, and later joins Mario on his adventures. So that's probably the deepest, insane part of this whole story, which is pretty deep for a partner character to have a story like that about his wife passing away while he was at sea. But yes, the story around this island and the grotto and everything is very basic. You're just going around trying to find the source of this creepy, you know, ghostly voice, and then you find it being Cortez, which is the pirate king that owns all the treasure in his ship, and that includes the crystal star. You battle him, you defeat him, and then he gives you the crystal star, but then you actually need his help. And this is, to me, one of the coolest parts of this chapter, is that the main antagonist of that chapter, the main villain being Cortez, you actually team up with him to take out a pirate crew of X-Nauts as well, led by Lord Crump, who actually blended into your crew the entire time, which you knew, and he even told you to do like a third, fourth wall break, which was pretty cool. But it's this really cool sequence where Cortez comes out with his pirate ship against the enemy pirate ship, and it's just a really cool kind of pirate versus pirate battle at the end. And I really did enjoy that conclusion to an overall simple story, but one that still was very interesting to follow. I do want to mention one character in this chapter as well, being Flavio, who's this great explorer that's full of cockiness and ego bigger than the game itself, and you get to see actually his character progression, as he starts off as this cocky guy that's just barking orders and having everybody do everything for him, and he's just terrified of everything, then completely mans up and does the right thing at the end of the chapter, and even barks orders to Cortez himself and says, look, we need your help, and I have exactly what you need in order for us to strike a deal. It's really cool to see the character progression here, and as he actually starts caring about everyone else besides himself, and I like things like that. One thing that of course I'm starting to notice is that there's a lot of puzzle solving in Paper Mario. I think we all knew that, but a lot of the chapter stories have to do around solving some type of mystery, and this one including because in chapter 6 you spend the majority of the chapter on the XS Express, which is a train for rich people to say the least. But yes, you're on this train and you have to help Pennington, which is a penguin, solve multiple different murder mystery cases. Well, not murder mystery, but just straight up mystery cases. People losing things on the train, people going missing, and just all kind of crazy things happening on the train. And you'll just kind of go through the different train cars and help him solve different mysteries, which is definitely different for the series. And it was a lot of fun to do this, believe it or not, in a Paper Mario game. And then things start taking a turn really deeply when you stop at a railroad station, where once it stops here, the train will actually pick up a hitchhiker, or dare I say, thousands of hitchhikers, called the Smorg, which end up covering the entire train from front to back, and it ends up taking lots of the passengers with it as well, and you have to get to the outside of the train and fight this thing on the top of the train. It's nothing super crazy story-wise, but the gameplay point is pretty interesting. But eventually you'll get to Poshley Heights, the destination that the train was trying to reach, and you'll uncover the secrets of the last crystal star, being hidden away in Pennington's secret building. Now once again, the story here isn't anything super crazy, but it definitely is just interesting, and I think that's what makes this game so good, is that the individual stories don't have to be groundbreaking. Not at all. The overall main story of this game is already pretty creepy and crazy, but it's just these little individual stories that really help to bring this game to life. It's more than just going from beginning of a level to the end of the level to collect some type of star or something. You actually have to figure out how this star ties into that individual story for that chapter. It's just really good. Now for chapter 7, this is the last chapter before entering the final area of the game, being the 1,000-Year Door. And as I really want to just talk about the gameplay of this chapter, as it really is the most exciting for me to talk about here, it's still got to be the story only, because I'm taking this one step at a time. But as far as the story goes, this one was weird at first, because you go through this giant fetch quest of going around all the past locations that you have already, just to essentially wake up a Bob-omb general to shoot you to the moon. That one is a little iffy, and I know a lot of people have a problem with that, and I'll touch more on that when we talk about the actual gameplay, but shooting to the moon was pretty daggone insane, and having a whole chapter that's based on an alien race that built a base up there is even crazier. But yeah, you're infiltrating the base and getting to see all the areas and even more areas that Princess Peach had visited and places that she hasn't visited up there the entire time, which is pretty cool. But you'll go throughout the various different rooms and there's lots of stuff to mess around, but as far as the story goes, there's not a lot here. The story is pretty basic, where you're just trying to get to the end of this factory area and find the crystal star, which is protected by Lord Crump once again. But as far as the story really goes here, there's not really any story. You're just collecting colored key cards and matching them to their corresponding doors and working your way through the facility. I mean, the most story that you're probably going to get is at the very end of the chapter, where you get to see Tech. And I don't want to jump into this right now because I want to talk about all the Princess Peach side story moments in a minute. But yes, it's a really cool conclusion arc to that character from the Princess Peach side of things, and it's really cool to see how that character initially dies off, even though technically the character never did die, and I'll dive into that once again as well. But yes, this story was pretty simple: infiltrate the moon base and get the crystal star. Now I want to talk about the Princess Peach scenes, and it's always really cool to have a side story, and there's actually two side stories in this game with Peach and Bowser, and I'll get into Bowser in a second. But Peach actually is a story about her and a computer system called Tech, which is the smartest supercomputer in the world, built by Sir Grotus himself and the X-Naut gang, and he pretty much develops a human-like emotion of love on Princess Peach, and he continuously tries to battle an inner thought of, should I help my master go with his plan, or should I actually just try to help Princess Peach because I have this unnerving love for her. And it's really cool to see how the story plays out, where he's constantly at battle with himself, trying to figure out what he should do. Should he execute this master plan for his creator, or should he just help this new damsel in distress that he has just met? And it's really cool to see how he's kind of fighting both sides, and eventually at the end he goes with helping Princess Peach, even though he knows it's going to cost him his life, and it does, because Sir Grotus finds out and reboots the computer, which he seemingly thought it completely wiped its memory altogether, but not quite. It still remembered Princess Peach just enough to help at the end of the day. But it's really cool to see him trying to learn these emotions as a human, trying to learn what dancing's about, and laughter, and love, and feeling for somebody. And it's really cool to see these human characteristics try to be given to a robot's computer program. And at the very end of the story, of course, when Princess Peach had been taken away, it's left alone, and the only person left to help is Mario and his partners, which eventually come to this base and come face to face with the computer. And before it self-detonates and destroys itself and the entire lab altogether, it leaves one final message for Princess Peach, feeling that maximum emotion of love. And that story with Princess Peach seems like a basic one, but it really is pretty deep as far as a Paper Mario game goes. In what Nintendo game, let alone what Mario game, are you gonna find a story where a supercomputer falls in love with a princess? It's really insane, but it's a sweet story nevertheless, and it really ties you with the character of Tech and really makes you feel for the computer. And now we get to the Bowser scenes, which are literally just the complete opposite. Bowser is definitely the comedic relief of this whole story, where he's going around trying to find the crystal stars too, so that way he can take Peach back for himself, but he's always like a step or two behind Mario. So every time he gets to the location, he finds out that Mario has already taken the crystal star, or he finds a fake crystal star, or there's always some stupid thing happening to Bowser where he fails miserably every single time. And it did get some laughs out of me, I can't lie. Him and Kammy Koopa together are an amazing duo, and I wish that they actually had more of a duo outside of the RPG games as well. I would love to see the two in a mainline Mario game, because I feel like Kammy Koopa just has so much more personality than any ordinary Kamek ever would, because Kammy Koopa is like this old hag that Bowser can't stand being around, but likes to keep by his side because he knows how loyal she is, and that she will do everything in her power to support Bowser and his royal army. And it's really cool to see the two bicker back and forth, or Bowser just make mistakes and Kammy Koopa say, "I told you," and then him punishing her and her just laughing at him. It's a really good part of the story, and I'm glad that they added these scenes, because I always needed a laugh every now and then, especially after some of the crazy story plots that we've had so far in some of these chapters. Once again, I'm not talking about the final chapter and the end of the game, and I'm grouping all of that stuff together just to talk about the ending later, but from the story, from the beginning to end of this game, I was always intrigued on the story elements and what was happening, even from the very smaller minor ones from chapter to chapter to the overall arcing one from the beginning beginning to the end of the game, it was always something that actually had me wanting to read dialogue. It had me wanting to talk to other NPCs and find out extra things upon the story. It had me even wanting to talk to Paper Luigi because he was on his own adventure, very similar to Mario's as well, and it was just constantly full of characters with life, characters with stories that you cared about. I know this story isn't anything super massive in comparison to other IPs from other consoles, but this is definitely something that I want more of in a Mario RPG. The whole point of a Mario RPG is also the time to give us these stories, because we never get stories like this in mainline Marios, whether it be 2D or 3D. So I was very relieved to have this story when I was a kid, and to see this story pretty much untouched with the remake all these years later was just as heartwarming. I love Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door's story. Coming straight off of Paper Mario 64, you can pretty much expect the same thing with the Thousand Year Door. It is a linear 3D turn-based RPG. Now, the actual RPG elements is something that I'll get into in a separate segment, but let's talk about the overall gameplay of just running around this world. It's pretty simple, and one thing that I know a lot of people would probably complain about, especially the modern Paper Mario fans with Sticker Star, Color Splash, and even something like Origami King, is the lack of depth that some of these worlds have, and this is where I gotta actually give the game some negative criticism. Most of the time, you'll be walking directly to the left or directly to the right, and almost giving the game a 2.5D appearance, where there's not a lot of depth to the levels. There's not really any open areas or large areas to explore and walk around and find secrets or hidden collectibles, where other games in the series actually did this. In fact, even the original Paper Mario on the 64 had a lot of areas, such as Dry Desert, that was extremely huge and full of places to go explore and check out, and bigger terrain options. If you've recently just came off of playing something like Origami King, you're probably used to some of these larger environments. I mean, every single world in Origami King is a lot bigger and has way more depth than any area in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and to me, this is something that I would love to see in the future. I would love to see bigger, more expansive areas and more reason to explore certain areas instead of just running to the right or running to the left. And if any element of this game felt outdated in the year of 2024, it would definitely be this. I definitely think they need to expand some of these worlds a lot more and open them up besides having them just be essential hallways that you run down. I mean, there's just so many missions where the whole objective is to run all the way to the right just to get some type of item and bring it back to another NPC that's all the way back at the beginning of the stage, running back to the left, and then running back to the right again. I mean, seriously, like, Chapter 1, you have to run all the way back to the right past Petalburg just to come right back to the beginning of Petalburg. In Chapter 2, you have to do the same thing to get Madame Flurry's necklace, going all the way to her house, and then back to the beginning, and then back to her house again. You have to do the same exact thing the entirety of Chapter 4, where pretty much you're going back and forth from the creepy steeple back to Twilight Town. In Chapter 5, you're doing the exact same thing in Key Hall Key, where you're helping out Admiral Bombery, going back and forth, left, right. It does become repetitive. But you'll find that Mario has basic abilities throughout this game that helps him solve puzzles and take out enemies as well. He has his signature jump and a hammer in order to fight and to hit things in the environment. He eventually learns a ground pound and a spring jump, which is used in some spots very late game, and also a spin hammer to break down giant blocks. Mario can use these to find, like I said, hidden secrets, floor panels for hiding star pieces, and other secrets across the lands as well. He will also become cursed, which is this game's way of upgrading Mario with new abilities such as a paper airplane, boat, and even a rolled up tube, or even just turning sideways to be paper thin. It's actually hilarious that this stuff is pretty much just origami forms of Mario, and then we eventually get Origami King and none of these appear in that game, which is extremely weird. But yes, these are actually a lot of fun. I just wish they did more with them. I feel like the airplane was very simple and you're just kind of barely tilting the thing to just reach some type of ledge. I would love to see more, boats usage. I feel like the boat's not used that much at all, once again being very late game. By the time you get to like Chapter 5 and you don't even use it for that many situations. But I really like things like this and I wish they did more with them. It had more specific areas to use these. I feel like turning sideways was used a lot, but I would have loved to see, more paper airplane usage, more boats, even more tubage. Yeah, tubage. I said tubage. But also, like I've talked about with the story, what makes the 1000-Year Door so memorable and fun is, once again, the partners, because not only do they have fun and interesting stories that you'll want to follow, they also have fun and interesting movesets that you can actually not only use in battle, but you can use in the overworld. Goombella will actually tell you information, give you hints about certain situations and what to do next. She's pretty much your tour guide. Koops can actually charge his shell and shoot it out like a projectile in a specific direction, and you can hold it to charge it in order to go do something else while that shell is still charging, getting ready to fire in that direction once again. Madame Flurry can actually blow things, revealing hidden passages, and she is used a lot in this game. There's so many little hidden areas and things where you need to blow away. Anything that looks odd and mysterious, you'll need to blow it away with Madame Flurry. Yoshi Kid is used to traverse areas a lot faster. You'll probably be riding him the entirety of the game just to get places a lot quicker, and you'll have to use him to flutter over gaps. Now, one thing I did notice was a slower startup to the running speed when you're riding Yoshi, and I feel like the reason for this is for better platforming, because it was very easy to move extremely quick as soon as you touch the stick while riding Yoshi in the original game, so now it helps you to move very slowly at the start so you can line up your flutter jump, which I actually think is pretty cool. Vivian can actually hide Mario like Bo from 64, but I feel like she's used the least out of all the cast members. She's very seldomly used, and I feel like there were some really cool ways that they implemented Bo's technique in the 64 version of Paper Mario, but here, I would have loved to see her used a lot more. More situations where you have to hide in specific rooms or hide from people chasing you or something would have been really cool. Bobbery can blow up walls or be tossed over top of them in order for him to hit something on the other side, and Miss Mouse is a secret character that allows you to find hidden treasure, and she is optional, but not very useful. I never really found myself using her, and she's always giving you really vague hints, and I'm still not 100% sure how to use her in the most effective ways, but as somebody who just ran around and slamming my hammer everywhere to find any type of hidden treasure underneath the ground, I never really even felt the need to use her in the overworld, like, at all. It just didn't make sense to me when I could just find everything on my own, even if it was a hidden question block somewhere, which there are. I didn't really need it besides like the very end of the game when I was missing one badge in Boggly Woods. But besides that, yeah, Miss Mouse was pretty much pointless for me. And it really makes you step back and think, imagine the 1000-Year Door without partner characters. I mean, some of the charm, not even the charm, but just the puzzle solving would just not be here at all. There's some really awesome puzzles in this game that are only capable thanks to these partners. And I really find it amazingly difficult to believe that the other Paper Mario games in the future did not have partners. And it just shows that we had it so good back then, so hopefully Nintendo continues to give us partners in future installments. And also, that reminds me that the brand new partner wheel system is awesome. It's so quick and better than ever to switch partners on the fly when you need the right character. That's just a great addition for this game. But as we continue to talk about gameplay, I wanted to talk about pretty much all the chapters all over again, like we just did with the stories, but this time for the actual chapter gameplay and how each one differed from the last. Well, the first chapter obviously being in Petal Meadows for chapter 1. This is a pretty basic gameplay chapter. It's a lot of just running and talking as you're making your way all the way through Petalburg and all the way to the ancient fuzzy ruins, where there you'll actually play a fun little quiz game. I love quiz games and Paper Mario games, and of course this is just as fun to have it in this game as well. But you get to battle some enemies and get the key that you're looking for until you have to backtrack all the way to the beginning of the stage. Yes, this is where we're going to begin to see lots of the backtracking take place, but it's not terrible in this chapter because you take it back to the pedestal and you get your new partner Koops, where you get to use his abilities in order to hit switches and time his shell tosses, which then takes us to Hooktail Castle, where you'll be using Koops a lot in order to hit switches and ride blocks up and down like elevators. This is a pretty cool castle overall, and for it to be a giant creepy castle as the first chapter of the game is pretty unique, honestly. Not to mention the fact that you get to find a badge that's the main weakness of the main enemy of this castle, being Hooktail. The coolest part of this castle in this chapter for me was just seeing the grand scale of the castle itself. Walking on that giant bridge on the outside of the castle and seeing all the land in the background, and then finally walking up the giant tower spire all the way to your fight with Hooktail as the music kind of dims out and the clouds get darker and it feels more ambient and creepy as you make your way to the final boss room. Now here I will not be talking about the boss battles. I'm actually going to be saving that for its own separate thing coming up, so stay tuned for that. But Chapter 1 is a really good start to the game. A lot of people will probably say Chapter 2 is their least favorite chapter in the game, and I'm kind of inclined to agree, and I've always agreed to this, and actually replaying the game, it's exactly how I remembered it. It's not terrible by any means, but it definitely is slower and very convoluted the way they handle the gameplay. So first off, you go on, once again, some fetch quests where you're going all the way to Madame Flurry's house, going all the way back to the beginning of the stage to get a necklace from the Shadow Sisters that you have to fight, then going all the way back to her house once again to give her the necklace and acquire her a company for the new partner, being Madame Flurry. And you actually get to use her in order to blow hidden things away, and you'll do this throughout the entirety of Boggly Tree. The Boggly Tree is where you'll actually be doing most of the gameplay in this chapter, where you'll go all Pikmin style, like I mentioned before, and have to guard the Punies, which are the little creatures that live inside this tree. You have to pretty much take them to these little pedestals where you'll place a stone in order to have something happen. Doing this will normally allow you to progress further in the stage, but the point is you're supposed to gather all these Punies, which eventually leads you to find 101 Punies, and you have to help them in battle against the Jabbles and also take them in deeper parts of the tree until eventually you can take them to where the crystal star is, because you need all 101 of them in order to activate the switch. It's just a very tedious chapter compared to the rest, where a lot of the times you're just trying to pick up Punies, or some Punies will fall down and you have to gather them. It's done a lot better than the original. I feel like I didn't lose too many Punies this time around, but there's so many times where an enemy will appear and they'll all just jump off of the path that you're on, and it's very much tedious, and you're just going to have to constantly go back, find the Punies that you're missing, gather everybody up together in the group, and continue pressing forward. It's just kind of like you're playing Big Brother or a parent of these guys and guarding them the entire time. It's not a terrible chapter, but it's definitely probably my least favorite out of all of them in this game. But thankfully I can say Chapter 3 is the complete opposite and probably my favorite chapter in the entire game, at least gameplay wise. And I feel like it depends on how you like your gameplay. Do you like more puzzles and puzzle solving, or do you like more of the combat system? And I know I haven't talked about the combat yet, but this is why I love this chapter. There is a lot of combat, and on top of that, there's also fun mystery solving puzzles that you get to do as well, and it's just awesome. So you pretty much arrive to this place, and you're in the minor leagues, and you have to work your way all the way up to the champion status by defeating Rock Hawk, and you'll go throughout the leaderboard just pretty much fighting all of these different types of enemies and characters, and you'll even have some that are designed specifically for this arena in this chapter, which is really cool. I love that diversity, and not only do you just battle all these enemies, but you have very specific tasks that you have to do. For instance, you might have to appeal, or you might have to go 3 turns without doing any damage at all, or you might have to let Mario take damage himself 3 times in a row before you're even able to attack. There's a lot of little missions and stuff that Grubba gives you, and I actually had fun doing these. I wish there were a little bit more challenges for the variety's sake, but it still was a lot of fun. And also, you'll have some break periods where you have to go out and do some type of task thanks to the mysterious caller that's calling you, trying to help you figure out what's going on in this arena. So there's times where you get to go into back rooms or closets or even ventilation shafts and stuff and really just peek around and find out what's going on, and I just love that. I thought the gameplay was really fun here, and just having constant battles but also have this murder mystery type of thing going on in the background was just like really cool, and the combination with the story and everything easily made this one of my favorite, if not my favorite chapter in the game. For a lot of people, myself included, Chapter 4 is in the same caliber, but the only reason why it was kind of hated in the original was the horrendous backtracking. It's still here, but it is streamlined a lot better thanks to a warp pipe that's stationed in Twilight Town. But yes, you would have to go from the Twilight Town up to the creepy steeple, back to Twilight Town, back to the creepy steeple, back to Twilight Town, and back to the creepy steeple again. Yes, I'm not kidding, it's a lot of back and forth, and the path is riddled with enemies to eventually to the point where you're not really gaining XP, and you're just constantly just trying to run and get away from all these enemies. But I like the puzzles and stuff that they threw your way, trying to make your way to the Twilight Trail, which was pretty cool, and I like getting to the creepy steeple and fighting the boos, and having that secret mini-boss was a lot of fun, and finding a way to get up to Dupless himself was pretty cool. And I love the use of Vivian hiding underneath Dupless's pet parrot in order to learn his name in the first place, and also find the letter P so that way you can actually type his name down. So yeah, if you play the original, you can't just put his name down. You actually have to go get the letter P, which is funny, and it was always like that, but it's still funny nevertheless. But at the same time, you do get a pipe here, and this way you don't have to go all the way back to Twilight Town in order to tell Dupless his name and then come all the way back to fight him. You simply can just take a pipe straight there, talk to him, take the pipe straight back, and then you can fight him, which literally shaves off probably like 30 minutes of extra gameplay of just running back and forth, which is always a good thing. Yes, I wish there was just a little bit more actual world to this, maybe some bigger parts of the actual creepy steeple or the trail itself, so that way it wasn't just a really short feeling chapter of running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But with the story being so daggone good and the whole environment and everything with this chapter, including the music as well, yeah, it's hard to put this thing anything under than really, really good in this game. Chapter 5 takes us on a fun little pirate adventure to Key Hall Key, and I wish they kind of took a page out of Paper Mario Color Splash of all games and actually allowed us to be on the pirate ship and maybe even visit little islands before reaching Key Hall Key, because once you finally reach it, it's once again a back and forth quest. And as you can see, this is starting to become one of the main issues of this game, a glaring issue that is clearly not fixed that much in the remake. Yes, it is streamlined to be a lot quicker, but it doesn't just take it away. It's still there and it's still noticeable, where once again at Key Hall Key, you have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth multiple times doing little missions, grabbing some soda for an Admiral Bobbery, and then grabbing Flavio to bring him back in his gym so he can open the entrance to the grotto. To me, it felt like the developers just wanted to keep the world small, but also wanted to hit that good time limit, you know, to play the game. They wanted to make sure the game wasn't too quick, so they just filled it with fetch quests, which obviously is a big problem with this game, as we'll talk about later with the side quests, but man, it's even more noticeable here. But once you get into the grotto, the actual world and chapter actually starts. There's some pretty cool puzzles to solve, fun enemies to fight, and a really cool instance to use the new paper origami boat that you get to turn into in order to go down waterfalls and different riverways, which is actually pretty cool. Not only confronting Cortez and defeating him in the bowels of an old ancient pirate ship, but you also get to kind of friend him and use him in battle against the X-Naut army on the seas as well during a really cool pirate versus pirate scene where you get to fight Lord Crump once again, but on a pirate ship, which is really cool. This chapter may not be anything super crazy or special, but still, it was really fun gameplay wise at least. Chapter 7 in my eyes was another really good chapter that was really fun to play through. It was a big detective mystery case the entire time, and you might be like, somewhat similar to chapter 3? Yes, somewhat similar, but this time less battling and more just solving detective mysteries with Pennington. So yes, you and the detective Penguin will actually go around the different train cars and talk to different people and solve their problems during the course of, I believe, a full 3-day trip. Something about being on a train for the majority of the chapter might come off as kind of boring for some people, but for me, I thought it was extremely different and something we have never seen before. In fact, the only complaint I think I would have is just there not being enough interesting things to do on that train, and the train could have been a lot bigger, but still what they were able to do with the size of the train was pretty cool. There's some really cool instances where you have to use your partners in order to uncover secrets on the train, and you even find a ghost with some pretty cool details with that. But yeah, there's just a whole bunch of crazy, goofy things happening on this train, and it's not the only part of the chapter, because halfway through you do get to stop at Riverside Station, and you get to go in and do some more puzzles and some fun things at the train stop during a beautiful looking sunset. It's a gorgeous scene, and I really love this whole area. It's just kind of like this abandoned train station that is really cool. You actually pick up hitchhikers being the Smorg at this train station, where they start to slowly overtake the train. I really love this idea, and once again, my only complaint is I wish they would have done more with it and had more of a slower transition, and more scenes of the Smorg slowly taking over the train would have been really cool instead of just a sudden boom and they all just attack the train in one instance. It's still a really creepy and cool scene, but I wish they did a little bit more with this chapter, finally ending it off at Poshley Heights and a really cool secret to the Crystal Star kind of hidden in a second dimension, which also was a pretty cool find. But overall, I thought Chapter 7 was a blast. And then of course we finish it off with Chapter 8, because I said I would not be talking about the ending right now, that is for a separate section, but Chapter 8 was really cool as well, and I feel like this was kind of where the story took a backseat, but even with the story calming down a little bit here before it actually amps up with the final chapter of the gameplay here is tons of fun. Just walking through this giant X-Naut facility on the moon is a blast. Now the fetch quest to get there, not so much fun. You're literally just going to all the past areas that you've already visited and just talking to people to find General White, and once again just lots of fetch quests, which I don't know why this game is so full of these. But yeah, this is a very slow start to this chapter, but once you actually blast to the moon and make your way inside the X-Naut facility, that's where the chapter really gets to kick in, where you get to go to all the past rooms that you saw Princess Peach walk in during her playthrough, which is really cool, and you get to just pretty much go play around with different rooms. There's like little tiles that you have to memorize patterns and also control cranes in order to pick up goodies. There's tons of fun to be actually had in this facility. As intense as you might think it'd be being the enemy's main home base, it's actually more laid back with the music bumping and you're just kind of running and vibing through hallways and different rooms and just kind of walking around the facility just having a blast. It's actually a fun chapter just to play and just visit these different rooms in the facility itself, and I just feel like the gameplay here speaks for itself way more than the story does. I do want to back up however and talk about this crane game because it looks cool, trust me it does, but it's not. It's miserable. You have to perfectly, and I mean perfectly, position the crane right over the item that you want to collect, or it's not going to pick it up. It's just going to drop right out of the hands, which makes it very difficult because you can't tell where you're aiming. There's no like target or sensor on the ground, so it's very hard sometimes to get it perfectly over the thing that you want to pick up. Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a rant about that. Now what about Princess Peach's gameplay? To me, it wasn't as good as her gameplay from Paper Mario 64. I felt like there was a lot of really cool moments where you had to transform into different things and just mess around inside her own castle with the different rooms, where this one tried to emulate that, but some of the chapters were really just boring and plot filler, which I don't know if I want to call it filler. It definitely did enhance the story a little bit, but I kind of wanted a little bit more with Princess Peach. For instance, a lot of the time you're just walking straight to the right in order to talk to Tech for a little bit before he ultimately just sends you right back to your room and ends the chapter. And there is an instance where you actually get to turn into an X-Naut guard, and I wish they did more with this instead of just walking into Sir Grodus' room, talking to him, and leaving. Like, there's so much more they could have done with this. One of the best parts of the game was kind of like Paper Mario 64 where you had to bake a cake, but this time you actually had to make a concoction. Yeah, you had to make some type of formula in order to transform Peach, and if you make it correctly by following the instructions, it will make her invisible. And Peach literally has to take off all of her clothes to be completely invisible, which is still crazy to say in a Mario game, a Paper Mario game at that. But this was pretty cool because you got to sneak around the facility and dig into the secret files of Sir Grodus' room, which I wanted more of this. This, yes. This, no. Now, Bowser's gameplay consisted mostly of unplayable cutscenes, but when he did have playable levels, there were only about 3 2D side-scrolling levels, all classic 2D Mario style, and very, I guess you could say, Super Paper Mario style as well. You get an overworld stage, an underwater stage, and a castle stage, and as these are fun little moments, I kind of wish they would have done a little bit more with Bowser. I would have loved situations where you actually went into a turn-based battle, but you got to play as Bowser and Cammy. There's lots of situations where Bowser had to battle people, like Rock the Hawk for instance, and also had to battle Lord Crump himself and his army, so I wish there was some situations where we actually got to just play as Bowser and Cammy with their own movesets for just a couple of times would have been cool. But I'm not gonna lie, I can't be greedy. This was back on the GameCube, and at least we got to play as Bowser, which was pretty bizarre for a Mario game back then, so it is pretty cool. Considering the fact that he's always the main villain, it kind of was switched this time around. But for my final verdict of the gameplay, Bowser and Peach were just the treats on top of the fun, amazing gameplay that we got already, with Mario's diverse moveset and his transformations, and being accompanied by a large amount of partners with their own special abilities as well to solve puzzles, really did help to extend the game's gameplay beyond anything that we've seen before. Like I said, partners are a must in a Paper Mario game, and Nintendo really needs to remember this when moving forward. The only real complaint I think I have with the gameplay is just the tedious backtracking, and definitely the design of the levels being more 2.5D based, where lots of the time you're moving to the left and to the right instead of moving in bigger areas, which we got to actually see in some of the modern Paper Mario games. Whether people like or dislike those games, I think it's best that if Nintendo moves on into the future with an original story and original worlds like these, I think they still need to take from Origami King, maybe even Color Splash's world building, where there are a lot bigger and more open spaces and more directions for Mario to move rather than just left and right. The Paper Mario series is strange. You can ask multiple different people how they enjoy the combat from the Paper Mario series, and depending on who you ask, it could be varying different questions. You know, if you've asked somebody that's played the first 2 games, they'll tell you it's a turn-based RPG. If you ask somebody that played the one on the Wii, being Super Paper Mario, there is no combat system. It's really a 2D platformer adventure game. And if you ask somebody that played maybe Sticker Star or Color Splash on the 3DS and Wii U, they'll tell you that they battled with stickers and cards. And then if you ask someone that started playing Paper Mario on the Switch with Origami King, yeah, it's a whole battle ring that you have to shuffle the enemies around in a big puzzle. So yeah, there's so many different battle systems, but why is it that people really fought for the original for so long and how we're finally getting it back, and why is it so important? Well, Paper Mario has always been a turn-based RPG, and that's really how all the Mario RPGs have been, with Mario RPG, Mario and Luigi, and now Paper Mario. And Nintendo found themselves always wanting to evolve the combat, because they didn't want to keep it the same. And I can't lie, I have to commend them for wanting to do something new every single installment. But sometimes a new game doesn't necessarily need some crazy new battle mechanic, and sometimes less is more. And that's one thing that I definitely learned even more revisiting Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, is that a simple turn-based RPG is sometimes the best possibility, and it's the best way to go about things. And for Paper Mario, I think that's the same thing here. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is a very simple pick-up-and-play combat system. Anyone can play it, and anyone can be pretty good at it. It's very simple, but it still feels fresh and unique for what it does differently than other turn-based RPGs. Everything in Paper Mario is based on timing. You dodge with timing, you super guard with timing, you execute attacks with timing. And this is something that actually is being pulled straight over from the original Mario RPG on the SNES, and it's even more evident within this game, where you're not just sitting there and picking a move and letting your character do all the work. You actually have to be pretty much involved in the entire battle, knowing when to dodge, knowing when to time your attack, and knowing even when to time your partner's attacks, as they even have different types of button commands as well that can come down to combinations of button presses or button holds, or even aiming your character to make sure they land their attacks. Mario's combat is relatively simple, but can change varying what type of badges that he's wearing, and I'll talk about badges later on in this video, but not for this section. But yes, there's certain badges that can change up Mario's attacks, changing up the way he jumps, giving him multiple jumps, or maybe giving him a super spring jump, and same with his hammer, where he can either throw his hammer or just do a hammer spin or a regular hammer slam. It's literally just Mario's jump and his hammer. And I will admit, maybe nowadays it might seem like it's just not enough variety for Mario's moveset for RPG, and I kind of agree. Back in the day with Mario RPG, Mario still had his hammer and his jump, but he also had fireballs and even red shells that he could kick at the opponent, and all the other characters had many different things as well, so I kind of wish they gave Mario a couple more options, including the fact that he can transform into different things like an airplane and a boat, and I kind of would like to see him transform into other things, maybe like a cannon or some type of other weapon in order to hit enemies. Would have been a cool alteration as well. But of course, I still think what they have is very simple and it gets the job done. Each partner has 4 attacks, and you can level them up by collecting shine sprites and giving them more attacks throughout the basis of the game. But she has a basic head bonk where she just jumps on the enemy. She can tattle, which is very huge in this game, as it doesn't only just document the enemy, but it also gives you stats and information such as their health and their weaknesses. She has a multi-bonk, which is just that, multiple head bonks, and she has a rally wink, which actually allows Mario to use an extra attack. Koops has Shell Toss and Power Shell, which are two forms of him launching his shell at the enemy by moving the stick backwards. He also can put a shield around Mario with a Shell Shield or a Shell Slam, which is just yet again another form of him shooting his shell out. I wish there were more options, and one thing that you're going to notice really quickly is there's not a lot of partners that actually have the ability to throw projectiles, and I kind of wish if he could like kick a shell or throw a shell to hit flying enemies. Lots of his moves are pretty much the same. Madame Flurry has Body Slam, which allows her to pretty much body slam any enemy, even the ones in the air, which makes her pretty viable at times when you need to take enemies out that are super high up on the stage. She has Lip Lock, which allows her to essentially kiss the enemy and gain health, and then she has Dodgy Fog, which can actually make her invulnerable from getting hit. Gale Force is what really makes her a powerhouse. It doesn't always work, and it's not guaranteed to blow enemies off the stage, but when it does, it can be extremely useful. If you come into a battle filled with smaller enemies or just enemies that are protecting the bigger enemy, you can just blow them all away. And it even is useful in certain boss battles like Cortez, where she's able to blow away all of his weapons at once. It is a really powerful force, and yes, you even get star points for blowing away the enemies. You don't even have to fight them. It's no secret that Yoshi Kid is the most powerful and the best ally in the entire game. His ground pound can hit pretty hard, with a couple enemies not really being affected by it, but his gulp is what is so powerful. He can eat almost every single enemy in the game, almost, and spit it out at the enemy behind him, dealing massive damage to both the front enemy and the back one. He also has one of the only and the best projectiles in the game, being the Mini Egg, which tosses eggs at the enemies and actually takes down their defense, making them smaller, allowing you to deal more damage. And he has a screen clearer technique, being Stampede, where he calls in a stampede of Yoshis to attack all the characters on screen. Yeah, he has a little bit of everything in his kit. He's truly a powerhouse. In fact, I kind of feel like he's a little too strong. I mean, seriously, once I picked him up, I had him in my party pretty much the entirety of the rest of the game. Whether it's because I needed him to carry me around, or whether it's just because there's a spiky enemy on stage and I needed him to gulp him for me and deal massive damage through it. Vivian is pretty good as well. She has Shade Fist, which just hits and flames one enemy, keeping them alit, which means the fire will constantly do chip damage the entire time. Veil is awesome, which actually allows you to hide Mario for a turn in case the enemy or boss is charging up for a massive attack, which does come in handy a couple times, especially towards the end of the game. Fiery Jinx is really good, as it's able to pretty much do Shade Fist, but to every enemy on the stage, and it gives every single one a fire status effect, which does chip damage. She also has Infatuate, which is able to confuse enemies, making them unable to do attacks for a while. Admiral Bobbery was kind of a letdown for me, because I wanted to use him so much more. He's a Bob-omb. Obviously, he's got to have some pretty amazing attacks, right? Not really. He has a basic bomb where he walks up and blows up, which is stuff that we've seen before, and it just doesn't do as much damage as I hoped it would. Bomb Squad is really strange. It shoots out all these mini bombs, but they're ticking in time down to like 2 or 3 turns later until they detonate, so most of the time you're going to finish the battle before they even blow up, even with some bosses. Hold Fast is also kind of pointless. It just works as a counterattack if somebody hits Bobbery while he has this activated. Then you have Bob-omb Blast, which is pretty massive and does do a lot of damage to every enemy on stage, where he just detonates like a nuke, but it's 9 FP. Yeah, 9 FP is kind of ridiculous for one attack, and lots of the time I didn't even glance at this move. And then we have Miss Mouse, which is clearly not meant to be a real battle partner, but I feel like they just like kind of made her a moveset just because they wanted to add her in the game for her treasure hunting ability. But yeah, her moves are pretty weak. Love Slap is pretty much like Lady Bose from Paper Mario 64, where she just slaps the enemy multiple times for some very small damage. Kiss Thief is where she'll kiss the enemy and actually take an item that they're holding, which is strange because you'll go throughout like the first couple of chapters of the game and you'll see enemies holding items, but you can't take them, and you're wondering, how do I do that? Well, you need Miss Mouse, which you don't get until a couple chapters into the game. It's strange. Once again, I never even wanted to do this. Items aren't even that great in this game, so I never wanted to steal one anyways. She has Tease, which just makes the enemies dizzy, which means they might miss attacks. It's not even guaranteed, so yeah, that move is eh. And then she has Smooch, which actually kisses Mario and gives him only 10 HP. And it costs 10 FP. For 10 health? Nah, it's absolutely not worth it. Not even for a second did I ever consider using this. I mean, for a lot of people, that's most of their flower power. I mean, in the first half of the game. So yeah, that was a strange, overpriced move. Now, what's so awesome about Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake is that all these set pieces and the stages and the backgrounds feel so much more alive, and they still look very similar to that of the original game. It's just the way they all pop in and fold in when you start a battle is so much more diverse. You can see set pieces kind of unfold and unravel in different pieces and fold out and fold in and kind of just build the set piece by piece, and it feels more papery than ever. And I just love the feeling of jumping onto a battle stage and just seeing what's going to pop up back there next. But I want to dive also into some of the other mechanics that happen during battles. For instance, you could have an enemy throw something at you like a can or something, and you can go attack them. It's nothing big, it's just something that adds to the scenery and to the fans that are watching you, which is really cool. You can watch all their interactions and reactions down there. It's pretty funny. What's the point of battling? Well, in this game, unlike the new Paper Mario games, you actually can level up, and you want to battle, because after you defeat enemies, you actually get star points, and once you reach 100 star points, you get to pretty much pick what you want to level up, whether it's your health, your flower power, which actually allows you to choose stronger moves and use your partner's special moves, or you can choose badge power, which allows you to slap badges that could change how your characters work, and once again, I'll get into that later on. You can also get special points by doing stylish moves or appealing to the crowd, and this allows you to use special moves, which are all tied to the crystal stars. As you complete a chapter, you get a new crystal star, which gives you a new special move. Sweet Treat is just the first basic special move you'll get in the game that actually uses the crystal star map that gives you HP, FP for both Mario and his partner. Earth Tremor allows you to cause earthquakes with the crystal star and shake the whole floor, hitting everybody on the floor, which is pretty good, and it's one that I would use over and over again in the first part of the game. But the reason why I kind of disliked it in the remake is it felt like the next section, when it put up the next buttons for you to press, always came up too quick, and they'd want you to press the A button like immediately when the bar started, and sometimes it just started too fast and I didn't know when they wanted me to press the button. Clock out can also be pretty useful. It allows you to throw a bomb at the enemy in order to blow them up and keep them from moving for a couple turns if you time it right, but I still, to this day, don't quite understand the timing of this. It's supposed to be a way for you to balance out throwing it into the crowd, throwing it back into the enemy, and I still, like I said, just don't understand exactly how it works. I think I'm just bad at it, but yeah, it was very strange to me when I always used it. Power Lift is one that I never used as a kid. I just wanted to always deal damage, but as I grew up and realized it's seriously one of the best in the entire bunch because it allows you to almost triple up on your power and your defense, really becoming a powerhouse. Especially combined with some of the badges in this game, you can deal some incredible damage and really wipe some bosses clean. In my eyes, it's kind of OP. It's very, very powerful, especially considering the fact that you get it after the 3rd chapter in the game. Art Attack is another really good one that pretty much makes the Earth Tremor obsolete, because now you can circle around enemies and cause even more damage, not only to enemies on the ground, but also enemies in the sky. And this is when I started to see lots of the other crystal stars just kind of were rendered useless by some of the later ones that you would find. Speaking of being rendered useless, Sweet Treat is no longer needed when you have Sweet Feast, which is pretty much a more upgraded version, allowing you to get even more HP and FP per use. Showstopper is one that I kind of never used, and I actually had to read exactly what it does just because I never used it, but it has a chance to actually take out the enemy in one shot, and I believe this is more along the regular enemies or weaker enemies in the game, and it's only a chance, so it might not work, but it's still definitely useful if you really need to get out of a situation. I personally never used it that much and never find myself in need to use it that much because I'm pretty sure it doesn't work on bosses. Supernova is a very powerful attacking crystal star that you get towards the end of the game, so I didn't get to use it that much unless it was like the final boss or the Pit of 100 Trials. Now, what actually makes all these crystal stars still very useful, even the earlier ones that you might not use as much, is the fact that you have to have a lot of star power to use some of the later ones in the game, where a lot of the time you're just going to settle for something like the first couple. But I constantly found myself going back to the same two the entire game, being Art Attack, which was good for grouping lots of enemies on stage, especially during the Pit of 100 Trials towards the last 20 to 30 floors, and also, of course, Power Lift, which absolutely allowed me to train wreck some of the bosses in this game. The only other thing I guess that we could talk about is the items, but personally, I think the items are kind of pointless in this game. Outside of healing items and maybe flower power usage like the honeys, I really don't know why why in the world you want to carry an item. Seriously, I've never once found myself wanting to pull out an item than using some of my character's more powerful attacks, because most items, I think the biggest and strongest item in the game only deals like 6 to 7 damage, and I'm just like, why? I don't know. Every time I got an item, I ended up selling it just to get more coins, just to buy a better badge. Those are the only items I needed. So yeah, if it wasn't healing or giving me flower power, I really didn't want it. Before we get into the boss battles, the only other thing that I would say is that I was kind of let down by the variety of enemy attacks. I feel like almost every single enemy in the game attacked in a very similar way. They slowly ran into you, or they slowly dropped down into you from the sky. And it was very, very telegraphed every single time. I really found myself never having a hard problem trying to learn an enemy attack, which I just wish there was more variety in something like Mario and Luigi, where enemies can do some wacky, crazy attacks that sometimes you're just not ready for, but almost every single enemy in the game in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door does a very simple attack, shooting a very slow moving projectile, or having some type of extremely telegraphed move, or wind up before they commit to their move. It's very easy to guard, also just making this game very easy, and that is something that I'll talk about a lot more as we go on to the last parts of this video. Is this game is incredibly easy. You definitely can make it harder on yourself with badges, which I'll get into, but at the end of the day, it's a very easy game. No one enemy hits extremely hard, or you'll hardly ever find yourself in peril, and believe it or not, the hardest part of the game is probably the first couple of chapters when you're kind of under-leveled with low health and low flower power, and once you start leveling up, it's kind of easy sailing from there. Also, some other small things to add is you can get bingos by lining up 3 identical pictures, and this is extremely easy to get. All you have to do is pay some slight attention to what's rolling, and odds are you're going to get a bingo every single time. Now, this is a very small gripe that I had, but I also found it kind of annoying, is that every single attack you do, especially if you do stylish moves right afterwards, you have to stop and wait like 2 to 3 seconds for your star meter to fill with points again, and then you can attack, and it just like, it adds up when you do this the entire game. There's also funny stage elements that can happen, like setting the enemy or yourself on fire, or freezing yourself, or dropping props in the background, or things from the ceiling could fall on top of you. And I promise this is the last thing before we talk about bosses, but you can also talk to a couple of wizards in the overworld of Rogueport and in the sewers, and some of them can grant you certain things, like there's one that could always boost your power randomly, or you might get double star points at the end, or double defense, or something along those lines that can definitely help you in battle, but it's overall small. You can also get lucky a lot of times, which also helps as well, because it just completely allows the enemy to miss you. But enough about the regular battling, let's talk about the boss battles, and I want to talk about each one and tell you what I thought about them. So overall, I love the boss battles, and their designs are amazing, and their boss themes are also some of the greatest we've ever heard in a Mario game, period. But I feel like I wish they took into account more unique ways to take these bosses down, which they definitely did with the 2 extra bosses they added in this game, and I'll get to them and tell you what I mean when I get there at the end of this list. But starting off the list, we have Hooktail, which actually did have a really cool gimmick where you had to actually find a specific badge in her castle, which is a sound of a frog, which was changed from a cricket in the original American version of the game, but she hates frogs, and it actually makes her weaker every time you hit her and that sound plays, which is pretty funny. And I absolutely love the whole gimmick of her trying to bribe you out of fighting her and just to give up by taking one of her requests, and you can just deny them all. Then she'll get mad and just break the whole set and just jump into the crowd and start eating the audience. It's something that's just bizarre and weird, and it already sets the tone for this game, letting you know what you're going to be playing is completely different from the previous Paper Mario game on the 64. And I absolutely loved that. And unfortunately, there weren't too many other bosses that took a risk the way Hooktail did that followed after. Magnus von Grapple from Chapter 2, as an example, really didn't do much. It was just Lord Crump and this giant robot, and the robot didn't do a lot besides stomp around and try to jump on you occasionally, and even when it just shot its fist out, you could take them out in just a couple of hits and they were just no problem. A cool mechanic that they could have done was actually had the robot plugged into some type of giant machine or something that you had to take out first in order to lower the shields or defense of the robot, and then you could attack it, or maybe you had to shatter shatter the glass where the cockpit was, something else would have been really cool. Macho Grubba was also pretty unique for the most part, where the main gimmick of this boss battle was that he had tons of status effects that he could put up. He could increase his power, or increase his defense, or make it harder for you to hit him, and there was a lot of stuff that he could do that not a lot of bosses really did the entirety of the game. That was pretty cool, and he had some crazy weird moves that he would try to hit you with that were deemed illegal back in the day. But even with Macho Grubba, it still is a great boss battle, but I wish there was a little bit more to it. Like maybe you had to use a quake hammer, or just use your hammer and period to shake the room and drop something from the ceiling in order to hit him or something, or jump up and hit one of the lights on the ceiling with Madame Flurry or something. I don't know, something along those lines would have been really cool to see. And it's also making me say to myself, it'd have been really cool to see that each boss of the chapters would have had some type of major weakness or something that you had to do with the respective partner. To see Coop step up and have to do something with his shell power would have been really cool, or Madame Flurry had to hit something high up in the sky that Mario couldn't for Magnus von Grapple, or maybe blow away a whole bunch of little robots or devices that he sent out, and the same thing with, of course, Macho Grubba. Maybe Yoshi Kid had to eat something with Gulp and spit it back at him in order to damage him at first, or something along those lines would have been really cool. Dupless was really cool, in fact, and actually did have a unique mechanic of actually transforming himself to be and act like Mario, and even Mario's partners, which was very unique, and you kind of had to remember how you fight, so that way, instead of attacking, you can actually dodge your own attacks. Really cool concept, and this is an example of what I'm talking about, adding some unique element to a boss battle, and Cortez does the same exact thing as well. Very creative with tons of different phases and weak points that you have to pay attention to, not to mention tons of unique attacks and crazy amounts of weapons that actually has a really cool gimmick of how to get rid of them. Using Madame Flurry's Gale Force, you can actually just blow all of his weapons away off the stage, which is a really cool idea. We also fight Lord Crump once again after Cortez, which was a really cool scene, fighting him on a pirate ship in the middle of the ocean. And once again, yes, a really cool gimmick to this battle, where you have to fight an army platoon of X-Naut soldiers that actually fold and mold into different things, like a giant bowling ball pretty much, to try to roll you over. And yeah, it does change the dynamic of the battle, and I love that. Smorg, in my opinion, was a really cool concept, but didn't quite hit the mark for me, because these are little creatures that can form into anything, so I was really expecting more than just two forms with two phases, because you can actually really go through this boss battle pretty quick, and it's nothing super unique. Yes, it has 10 tools that you have to take out, but once again, there's only 3 of them, and then phase 2 only has one giant one that's like a giant claw of a scorpion, and then that's about it. I really just wish they'd done more and had like more phases of different transformations and different looks to them. Would have been really cool. Or maybe if it actually used the NPCs that it had captured from the train and like threw them at you or something, that would have been awesome. But then, of course, we fight Magnus von Grapple version 2 on the moon, and it's essentially the same exact boss fight again, maybe a tad bit harder, and tries to copy exactly off of Hooktail by sucking up audience members, and this time chucking them at you, which was cool and all, but once again, there wasn't like a specific gimmick or way to take him out that really changed the dynamic of boss battles, and it just was a, once again, boring boss fight for me. Now, once again, I don't want to talk about the end of the game bosses right now, because I want to save that for my in-game talk, which is coming up soon, I promise, but I will talk about the 3 post-game bosses, where at the end of the Pit of 100 Trials, you have Bonetail, which is more of the same as Hooktail, and also you'll find out the same thing as another dragon as well, being Gloomtail. I wish they would have changed up the attacks a little bit. I mean, overall, it's the same exact fight, just a lot harder, and now Bonetail can breathe ice. Yeah, I was looking for a little bit more. But the 2 brand new bosses that they added in the remake were some of the most creative and unique boss battles I think that they have ever come up with for a Paper Mario game, and I love them. For Waka, the more you keep attacking consecutively, it will actually give him more ammo to hit you with, so you'll want to do max damage with the least amount of attacks possible, which is a cool new approach. And these Waka bumps can do tons of damage, to the point where even if you just regularly dodge, it's still going to probably kill you, so you're going to need to learn how to super guard, and I like how it forces a really difficult mechanic into a late game boss battle. But Prince Mush is seriously amazing, and this is where I had some of my peak fun for the game. I love his boss battle. It was very unique and very different, and once again, it required you to super guard, because the only way to deal damage when he entered his second phase was to super guard him in order to put him into a weakened state. And if you didn't, he would dodge and pretty much block all your attacks. Also, he had a cool mechanic where he had two different forms, or fighting stances, where he would jump up and down or move left and right, and you had to hit him with a side sweeping attack or a jumping attack based on the stance that he was in, because if not, he would actually dodge it, which actually can change your whole formula up, which was really cool. These type of bosses is truly what I want to see from the future of this series. Hopefully we still have turn-based RPG Paper Mario games and Nintendo goes back to the traditional form like from the Thousand Year Door, but it doesn't mean you have to have basic boss battles. You can have cool, unique ways to take these bosses out, or some type of cool, unique gimmick with its basic turn-based elements. It still works really well, as you can see here, where there's different ways that you have to attack, or some attacks are rendered useless and they don't work on that boss, and you have to figure out how to attack the boss in a correct way. And I love that. And these two extra bosses were a big highlight of this game for me. But like I said before, my main complaint also is that the game never really gets that hard at all. And that goes for all the bosses that I talked about and even the end of the game, which I'll talk about here soon. But it never really reached a difficulty that made me say, man, this was kind of difficult, or I had to stop and think of how to attack. The only time I fell in the entire game was against my first battle of Prince Mush, and the second time I was able to complete it, but barely by the skin of my teeth. But still, it was a very difficult boss battle, and I could tell, even with me being very leveled up by post-game, I still had troubles fighting against this dude. Now, this is a good time to talk about badges because they do have a lot to do with battling, and this is a main reason I feel like the game can be extremely easy, or you can technically make it extremely hard on yourself, but badges are pretty much a very big focus of this game, as it can improve your attack, your defense, and other stats to make you stronger, and just simply more viable in battle. But that's exactly the problem, because it's very easy to make Mario kind of overpowered with badges. In fact, there's even badge power only runs where people don't gain any hearts or any flower power and just completely crank up their badge, because there's some badges that actually allow you to deal like double or triple or even quadruple damage if you keep stacking certain attack badges. For instance, there's one if you're under 5 health, or if you're under 10 health, or even if you're down to 1 health, you'll do extreme damage. And yeah, that makes the game extremely easy to the point where you can almost one-shot or even two-shot some bosses. Now, there are some badges, I guess you could say, or at least one real one that makes the game technically a little bit harder. Like there's one that just makes you deal double damage. But yeah, outside of that, I don't think there's really anything else. And I feel like putting on a badge to literally just try to make the game harder doesn't really feel like a true hard mode. And I kind of wish they just had an extra hard mode after you beat the game once. You know, here's a new game plus that makes the game slightly harder. Something like that could have been cool. But yeah, it is for the most part a pretty simple breeze to brush through this game. But I will say I really do love badges, as they can give Mario completely different moves that we haven't even seen him do, and things that he can't just straight up unlock. You have to have certain badges to do certain things, which is pretty cool, like the Quake Hammer, which allows him to shake the entire ground by slamming his hammer down or even throwing his hammer with one. So I really like the badges, and I hope that they return in a future installment. But I do hope if it does return, it focuses on giving Mario and his partners maybe new attacks. I really like that idea. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door has honestly one of the best endings I think I've ever experienced, not only in Paper Mario or Mario and Luigi or any RPG for Mario that sake, but literally Mario games in general. It is a conclusion like none other, and you really feel it, especially with the remake when you have all of your partners standing around the circle as you're placing all the crystal stars in the pedestal and finally unsealing this ancient door. It honestly feels kind of surreal that you've made it this far, and knowing that the end of the game is behind this giant ancient door that's placed underneath the whole city that you take place in there in the whole game, it's just so wild, and it is full of creepy moments. This truly feels like the end of your journey, and instead of finishing off on a giant floating Bowser's castle in the sky, you're instead going deep underground into ancient ruins from a door that's been sealed for 1,000 years. The Palace of Shadows is just an overall different feeling feeling that most games don't give you at the end, like especially a Mario game. It just feels dark, gloomy, eerie, and just a big mystery, like what in the world could be down here. I love the colors and the way the area looks, with bright fluorescent reds and deep dark blacks plaguing every single pillar and corner of the room. This final area also serves as a final test. It's something that brings all of your skills together in one final test for Mario and every single one of his partners. There are rooms full of traps that you have to slowly walk across, or you'll step on a spike. There's rooms that put your platforming to the test, where you have to jump over fire bars. Rooms that give you extra hard battle challenges. Of course, nothing too difficult because the game is overall pretty easy, but still, fun challenges nevertheless. And even hallways with fun little puzzles, where you have to pay attention to the lit torch, which lights your direction on where to go next, which could seem like a never-ending loop that you're running in if you're not paying close attention. And you'll even have a battle against yet again another dragon, being the third dragon of the game, the older brother of Hooktail, which is Gloomtail, which obviously is the same type of battle. This time he spreads poison instead of fire or ice. It's overall a pretty simple boss battle, but it still is pretty bizarre to see a giant dragon when you're not even halfway through the entire world yet. But honestly, when I got to this middle section with the tower, I always remember this part as a kid. It was so exciting. I loved the mystery surrounding this tower, the creepy music playing in the background, and going to the different rooms trying to solve each puzzle that they had, because each room required a puzzle to be solved with either Mario or one of his partners, really utilizing everything that you've learned up until this point. I absolutely loved this. This was filled with fun puzzles that made me say, oh, that's probably what I have to do, and trying different things and finally guessing right was extremely satisfying. This is what I wanted to see even more of in this game, and there are a lot of moments where you have to use partners for some very obscure puzzles, but none of these felt unfair. If you read the sign and really thought about what it was talking about, you could probably figure these out. To me, none of them were really that hard at all, especially after knowing what to do already from playing it in the past, but I can imagine first timers might be having a little bit of a problem with some of these, because they're just so unique. I love this. But completing all the puzzles and collecting all the keys in the tower will ultimately unlock an even deeper section of this area, taking you even further underground, and of course, getting very creepy. You'll find yourself yet in another battle with the Shadow Sirens, but one of the members now replacing Vivian is actually Dupless. There's a cool little story bit where he was acting like Professor Frankly to fool Mario and to actually get into the Thousand-Year Door. It's actually pretty clever, and it was something that I definitely never saw coming as a kid. But after defeating the Sirens, you actually push further down into the palace, which actually gets more mechanical-like. You'll come into some factory-looking areas, which is kind of weird because if anything, it was kind of reminding me more of a creepy ancient place. I kind of wish it got scarier, darker, and even creepier rather than more mechanical. And I guess it also ties into the theme of the tower that you activated, where something happened down here a long time ago where it kind of does mesh into the theming a little bit from that area. But still, I think I would have gone with something more creepy and darker the further you went down. It would have really matched the setting, especially considering the fact that what the actual treasure was when you finally do reach the final floor. You finally make your way to the end of the palace, which is a beautiful red throne room. It always looked really good, but man does it stand out in the remake. Some of these locations is truly mesmerizing how saturated and beautiful the colors look. The red and blacks is just beautiful. It's seriously one of the best final looking rooms I've ever seen in a Mario game. Finally, you come face to face with Sir Grotus, the leader of the X-Naut gang that's already made his way to the throne room. Now this battle was a definite letdown for me, and I couldn't really remember as a kid how much I enjoyed it, but replaying this again, I definitely do not enjoy this boss battle that much. It's just incredibly simple. I know it's a series of boss battles and he's just trying to start off that series, so it's not meant to be extremely difficult, but it's kind of boring. It's just kind of Sir Grotus throwing up little mites in order to generate a shield around him, and you have to take out the mites and then take him out. It's kind of repetitive, he doesn't do a lot of damage, and he just kind of stands there guarding the entire time. It's kind of underwhelming, considering the fact that he's the big bad of the whole story. I mean, literally, he gets upset at Lord Crump being defeated like 4 times by Mario, but at least he had 2 giant robot mechs and the usage of the X-Naut army, where Sir Grotus is just there alone and doesn't really do anything special. However, having Bowser and Kammy Koopa drop in for a second boss fight right after that one is pretty unique, and considering the fact that you immediately start the battle with the same amount of health, FP, and stats that you had when you were fighting Sir Grotus, I really like that. It throws you off guard and you're like, oh shoot, we're jumping straight into another battle, and of course, it's against Bowser. It's just kind of like awesome to see this because you don't really fight Bowser this entire game. There was one time you fought him in Chapter 3 and that was about it, but it's cool to see him again and have a secondary boss fight before getting to the true final boss. Then Sir Grotus makes a run for it, in the final area behind the throne room, being a hidden chamber, and it's a really dark, creepy run down to the bottom of the staircase before appearing in front of the final boss of the game. Of course, we now know that Sir Grotus actually knew that this was an ancient evil, Shadow Queen, that was imprisoned 1,000 years ago. And of course, Sir Grotus knew this and wanted to use the power of the Shadow Queen for himself in order to take over the world. And of course, in order to do this, he needed the help of Princess Peach to be the physical vessel for the spirit to reside in. The Shadow Queen finally shows herself and covers the entire world in darkness. It's an eerie, mysterious feeling. You see this creature in front of you, and the music is even eerie, and you see her immediately vanish Sir Grotus in a flash after trying to control her. And immediately the game lets you know that she's a force to be reckoned with. I especially love the added storyline with the Shadow Sirens, because for a while it was very confusing who they were and why they were even working for Sir Grotus in the first place, until we find out that all along they were here to resurrect the Shadow Queen herself. And it makes sense, and you look at their appearances, yeah, I can see that. I love this because it adds yet again an extra layer of depth to the story. These are characters from the very beginning of the game that all along was working for the main antagonist, Shadow Queen, in order to help free her from her slumber. But she takes over the vessel of Princess Peach, so of course our battle is now against Dark Peach. It's a pretty straightforward battle where you of course do some damage and then eventually, boom, you can't do damage anymore because the boss is super powered up. And we've seen this many times, including the first game with Nintendo 64's version, where Bowser powered up as well with a Star Rod. And of course, we are unable to do any damage to her without going through some story beats first. Gives us an absolutely beautiful scene and music piece of the crystal stars flying off to their respective chapters and lands. You see all the important figures that you have met along your way and how each and every single one of them give Mario and all of his partners the cheers that they need, and even the respected partners that come from each world get their cheers from family members and friends, and it feels so surreal. You see one last moment of everybody and all the worlds that you visited and talked to. It truly feels like a special moment. Hearing the voices of all the characters and everybody cheer you on before a final battle against the evil Shadow Queen, it feels surreal. An absolutely top tier final boss battle with an absolutely top tier ending to the story. Peach uses all the last bit of energy that she has to reach out to Mario and his friends in order to power them up and give them the necessary energy that they need to defeat the Shadow Queen. And then the true final battle begins. I will say, as cinematic and amazing as this looks, I actually still really wish the final boss did a little bit more than what she actually does in game. Shadow Queen's main gimmick is powering herself up and hitting you with very strong, powerful attacks, which is not necessarily a bad thing because you want your final boss to be very powerful with very powerful attacks and high defense, but at the same time, I feel like this was just hard final boss. It didn't really do anything super unique. Yes, she had two giant hands that you could also attack in order to dispel, but they each only had 5 health, so it really wasn't a big nuisance whatsoever. Like I said, the main thing with this boss battle was just big hits every now and then, which you could obviously just hide with Veil from Vivian in order to dodge them and continue wailing on her. And odds are, if you're using any of your crystal stars and your badges, you're gonna beat her relatively quickly. It definitely still is a very cinematic boss fight with very high intensity music, but once again, it needed a little bit of something else. I was actually expecting Shadow Queen Peach to actually come out of the shell of the Shadow Queen again and have different attacks herself, but she stays locked behind her chest ribbons. But finally you defeat her and dispel the evil Shadow Queen from the world forever. It's a great satisfying feeling, finally saving Princess Peach and watching her drop down to the altar. Professor Frankly finally finds you and makes his journey all the way to the end and actually says there was indeed a secret treasure chest after all, but then you find out later on that it's just a dried shroom. It's nothing at all. It's actually very poetic, and I found it hilarious that that's the special treasure that's been down here and that the whole game was kind of based around, but I thought it was a cool and funny way to end the game. But finally, Mario and Peach head back to the docks of Rogueport and say their last goodbyes to all their friends that they made along the way. It actually does tug at the heartstrings a little bit. You've made memories with these characters. These are characters that you've actually learned their stories and went through their struggles with them. You saved them from their own problems, and you actually got to journey through an entire game with more characters than just Mario and some Toads, and of course whatever partner character that followed you everywhere. You actually now had a full team, a full family of friends that got to join you on your expedition. And it feels so great to have this again. And I'm so glad to revisit a game that actually made me smile this much with all these friendly faces. And it's what really makes me hope that the future of Paper Mario does this again. Because I actually felt something. I felt real sadness at the end when I had to leave all these characters, even knowing that in the post-game I'd come right back, but it just felt surreal. The boat ride across the ocean back to the Mushroom Kingdom literally just always gave me chills. I love that song that plays and the quiet, gentle breeze on the ocean. It's all Wind Waker vibes at night, and I just love it in this Paper Mario story. It's honestly perfect. And somehow the game's still not done. They keep going, giving you as much story, juicy details that you don't even need, but they do it to really solidify the story of this game and the partners that you met along the way. Goombella will actually send Mario a letter, and it will show a little snippet of her going back to all the different worlds and talking to all the partner characters that you met up with, and telling you what they're doing now. Like for instance, Madame Flurry jumping back into stage plays, and Dupless actually being Mario and joining her in these stage plays to retell the events of the story in a stage play, which is like a stage play in a stage play in a stage play. I love it. You get to learn about Yoshi Kid following after Gonzalez, which is Mario, to try to be the best of the Glitz Pit, which is awesome. And he even wants to fight Mario one day. I can't believe they didn't allow us to fight him in a practice match. That'd have been awesome. But you even learn about Vivian trying to get back with her sisters and make things right, which is also a cute little ending for her. They even give you story updates on the villains and what they're up to now, and it's just awesome. It's stuff that we absolutely do not need, but it's also stuff that really does tie the story even closer together. Shoot, there's even a little hint that Tech is still alive on the moon and wants to see Princess Peach again. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about that one, because I know it was an extremely emotional moment when Tech actually self-destructed the whole X-Naught facility, but what are you gonna do? It's still cool to see that the character still lives on. But this was a conclusion that you can tell Nintendo and Intelligent Systems wanted us to feel. They wanted us to remember this forever. As they closed the book on this story, it definitely felt like an ending of an amazing story, something that you can't really say too often about Mario games. And when I say the Thousand Year Door ended on a beautiful note, I truly mean it ended on a beautiful note. Now, I really want to thank you guys for sticking around this far. The main game may have been discussed, but there's still a little bit more that I want to go over before wrapping up this video. And that includes right now the post-game, side quests, and extra stuff that you can do after you complete the game. Now, the really only side quest in the game is in the form of the Trouble Center quest. And you might have heard they're not very good. In fact, they're pretty bad. And I remember as a kid just not doing these, and I was wondering always what I was missing out on. And I've heard people say how bad they were, but after doing them now, I can confirm, even with better fast travel, they suck. Like, extremely suck. Almost every single Trouble Center quest requires you to go to some other world, grab an item, and bring it to somebody in another world, and sometimes it's even more convoluted than that. It's going back and forth between 2 or 3 worlds multiple times in order to do some silly quests that ultimately just required you to give somebody an item. And some of them can be just extremely tedious, where you have to go give somebody something that they gave you to give to that person, you give them the item, and then you have to return back to the original person that told you to give the item to their friend just to tell them, hey, I gave the item to your friend, which is just annoying. I think the only one that left me saying that was kind of cool was when you had to pick up tons of the gym shorts in the locker room at Glitz Pit. But of course, that was something a little bit unique, but then you had to take the gym shorts to a completely random person in Rogueport just to get rid of them and come all the way back to Glitzville again and tell Jolene that you got rid of the shorts. It's just stupid. I wish the side quests actually had you doing unique tasks, or lots of hunts where you get hints as to where a character is, or it adds something new to the location after you revisit it. It's not just going back and talking to an NPC that's been standing in the same spot the whole game. And of course, going from world to world to world to world, back and forth, even with the quick travel system, is just annoying and tedious. And yes, I just could not imagine doing these on the original game. I'm glad I actually skipped this when I played the game multiple times as a kid, because oh my gosh, it's just terrible. There's one side quest where you have to go into the pit of 100 trials and bomb a wall on like floor 20 or 25. I can't remember exactly what floor it was, but it's already annoying considering the fact that you have to complete all 100 floors twice in this game because there's 2 special rewards down there. So doing it a 3rd time just to get that, and maybe even a 4th time if you want to get a special badge at floor 50 before getting to the bottom, it's just a lot of stuff that I don't even want to think about doing again. Thankfully, once you complete the Pit of 100 Trials, you get more fast travels, but still, it's just annoying that a side quest actually had me going down here in the first place. But of course, we might as well jump into this. There is a side thing that you can play at the end called the Pit of 100 Trials, where you have to go through 100 floors fighting enemies until the very last floor, which is a boss against Bonetail, which we've already talked about. This can take a very long time. I'm talking a couple of hours of a long time, especially your first time, where odds are you're not going to find many warp points, where there still are some in the later floors that can skip 5 to 10 floors. For the most part, you're going to be still probably going through at least 80 floors without paying coins. Now this is okay, but this is definitely where I started to get a fatigue of the battle system. I was very tired of doing the same moves because I was clearly powered up enough to take out all these enemies, but it was a constant same cycle of using the same moves over and over again and defeating enemies the exact same way, mostly using Mario and of course my baby Yoshi because his gulp move is just that powerful. It's the same attacks over and over again. Jump, gulp, jump, gulp, jump, gulp, and before I knew it, I was just literally going through the motions and drained of going through 100 floors of this. Not to mention, I actually had to do this 3 times. Once you get to the bottom floor, at floor 100, you fight Bonetail, which is great. You leave and everything is grand, until I learned that there was a secret final boss once you go down again, and I thought I'd read everything perfectly fine online to know exactly what to do. Hit the whacker in the head as much as you possibly can until he stops respawning on Key Hall Key, which is pretty easy enough, and complete the Pit of 100 Trials 1 time already, and I believe you have to complete the game. Well, I did that and came back down here, and guess what? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I ran around the room, couldn't figure out what to do, and was pretty upset because clearly I missed something. I knew there was a secret boss, thankfully I've heard about it online, so I left the pipe in disgust because I have no clue what happened, just to get an email, no joke, 5 minutes later after leaving the pipe that tells me, oh hey, there's a secret boss waiting for you down there. Go complete the Pit of 100 Trials again. Yeah, had to do it a 3rd time just because I had to wait for an email. A random email that would get sent to me. This is just horribly bad. So of course I had to go through the Pit of 100 Trials a 3rd time doing all the floors, and of course I got extremely unlucky where I didn't really get any warps to skip floors, so I was doing just a lot of the same stuff I've been doing already and completely obliterating enemies with 1 hit because of how powerful I've already was. Why must the game make you wait for an email? It truly does not make sense. I mean, the criteria should have just simply been hitting the whacker enough times and completing the floors 1 time. Why was that not enough? Matter of fact, why in the world didn't the whacker just appear after the fight with Bonetail? I mean, wouldn't that make more sense? Considering the fact that the Pit of 100 Trials doesn't get harder your 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th time, it's the same exact enemies in the same exact order with the same exact health and defense. Why in the world must they make you fight them again, especially if you've already blown through it once? I promise I'm good, it was just a stressful time. But let's continue on to other things you can do to work for a 100%. You can actually go back to the glitch pit, and yeah, it's the same exact battles, which was extremely lame. Yeah, it's the same enemies and the same ranks that you'll climb up, starting at the bottom, going to the top. It's nothing different, and I'm very surprised they didn't have any special things here. There is one boss against Prince Mush which isn't even tied to climbing the rankings. I don't know why. It would have been cool to finally fight him at the end, but I really would have loved it. They added some extra enemies, or maybe some extra special enemies that weren't in the entire game at all that you only got to see here. But nope, it's the same exact battles, and even Rock Hawk is the exact same. You can beat him in like 2 hits by this time, so I'm really surprised they didn't give him some new moves or make him an extra special final boss. It would have been a really cool thing to do in post-game, so for it to be the exact same felt a little lazy to me, especially with the remake giving you the opportunity to completely change this. Something else I'll talk about is you have to collect all of the tattles, which literally requires you to use Goombella's special tattle move on every single enemy, mini-boss, and main boss in the entire game, which if you miss any, you can go to Professor Frankly's office and find them in a trash bin that are missable, which is really cool. But if there's any enemies that you missed that are not missables, which means you can go back and find, yep, it's your job to go back and tattle all those enemies that you missed. So you probably want to do this from the get-go if you're just starting the game, because it's something that is tied to a full 100% completion. This wasn't bad for me. I mean, I pretty much just tattled every single brand new enemy or boss I came across, and I tried to fight as many as I could, and I only had like 2 or 3 that I missed, and that was from the Glitz Pit, and I knew I missed a couple of those, but I could go back and get them, and I was still missing 1 at the very end, and I was stressing out trying to figure what in the heck I was missing, just to realize it was one of the cardboard Goombas from the training center. How in the world is this a tattle? The Pianta Parlor was another thing I never really spent time on when I was a kid. I went in there a couple times just for some story stuff and left, but I actually went back in here and really put in, honestly, like 3 or 4 hours, because there's tons of reasons to be back here. For instance, getting cake mix in order to make certain recipes, or just collecting any other badges that I was missing, and they required Pianta coins, which you can win them or just straight up buy some in order to win even more with those coins. It's just like a Mario casino, to be honest. You have some basic slot machines that are a little bit different from the original Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, but then you have the Papercraft games, which are okay. I thought the plane game was just extremely stupid. There's some extreme tech online about how to get further, and you have to like tilt it a certain way and learn how to angle the plane. It's really basic when you think about it, but there's some really in-depth techniques that you have to learn, where it just became a nuisance to play, and I really didn't like this game. I wish there was some actual like action of flying the plane and fans that could blow you up and things that you have to look out for while flying in the air, but they made this incredibly simple. The paper game is just a big race against 99 other NPCs. You have to turn sideways into your thin paper form in order to not get blown off the path when the fans move, but other than that, you're just kind of doing some slight platforming and collecting coins along your way. It's nothing super special, and one of the biggest problems I find with these modes is right here, where it's the same exact path and obstacle course every single time you play this game. The tube game is definitely one of my favorites. I love controlling Mario like this and jumping over obstacles and swirling around them and kind of going around a little racetrack, but once again, there's only one track and it's the same exact one every single time you play this game. I would have loved it if there were at least 3 to give me some variety, but nope, it's essentially the same thing, and the coins might be positioned in slightly different spots, but I believe there's only like 2 different spots they can be put in. And the boat game is literally like the same thing, but you're in a boat now and you have to dodge obstacles like barrels and whirlpools, and you go around this track, and it's the same exact track and same exact placement of obstacles every single time you play it, which is still a letdown. So this was a little fun addition to the game to have these mini games in the casino, but some of the prices of some of the things in the store are very high, which means you're going to have to play these games a lot, and they get boring very, very quickly. I eventually just learned the meta way to play the plane game by watching videos online, and eventually just ended up playing that like 40 times to get all the coins I needed to collect everything. Some other things you can do is there's NPCs littered around Rogueport with their own stories that you can follow at the end of each chapter, including Luigi, who's actually going on his own journey, and he has his own partners at the end of each chapter that you can talk to as well. I always found this pretty interesting, and as a kid I couldn't care less, but now I actually really like it, and I wonder if they're ever going to make a game off of his story, because it sounds like it could be a lot of fun. Now, anything else to 100% the game just require you to collect pretty much all the badges in the game, all the star pieces, and shine sprites. Badges were not bad at all until you're trying to find that one that was hidden in the secret block in Boggly Woods. That was pretty annoying, but star pieces kind of sucked, because yes, there is a counter for each area that you're in to keep track of, which is very helpful, but literally in every single area you'll need to walk in and just start pounding your hammer on the ground to see if there's a secret floorboard, because some can hide in random floorboards which you have to be really close to in order to find by slamming your hammer I really didn't like this. I just wish if you ground pounded in a single area, you could see it flip from afar away and you can just tell that way, or just simply don't have ones hitting underground. I hate that aspect in general, but after you do all of this juicy stuff, you get a badge. Yes, a gold badge that actually allows Mario to turn all nice and golden, which then allows you to see all the trophies in your inventory. Now, the one trophy that definitely took the most time was the cooking trophy. This is something else that I never even bothered with in the original Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, where you have to make every single recipe, and this is very annoying. There's a total of 58 recipes, which requires you to either use one item or mix 2 items together to make a recipe. And some of them you could probably play around and get, but probably after like 10 of them, you'll start to get confused by what you need to mix in order to make a new recipe. And there's no in-game dialogue or anything, or like a recipe book or a cookbook that you can find in order to help you figure this out. Unless I'm missing something and was just completely stupid, you're literally going to have to look online in order to find out all these recipes. And even then, it is a very big task to get everything that you need to make the recipes. There's so many times where you have to go to very specific worlds in order to get an ingredient, like a coconut from Key All Key, or do the same Petuni quiz at the Great Boggly Tree over and over again just to get a single egg, which you can't get in multiple successions, so you have to leave the entire world just to come back to get the egg again. Or going all the way to Petalburg just to get a leaf every single time you need a leaf. There's so many things like this with each of the different worlds where you have to constantly go there in order to get an item and bring them back to Zesty in order for her to make you some new dish. And there's absolutely no purpose for these dishes. Yes, some can give you tons of health or powered up or tons of defense or tons of flower power, but at the end of the day, do you really need any of this overpowered cooking for this extremely easy game? And odds are you're not going to find any of these recipes on your own. Yet you probably don't, because a lot of the recipes are very, and I mean very obscure, to the point where you definitely need a guide. It takes a very long time to get all these recipes. I want to say it was almost an additional 5 hours of gameplay just going to the different worlds, collecting items and bringing them back, including the cake mix that you could only win in the casino, which means you had to keep going to the Pianta parlor, playing games in order to get the cake mix. As you can imagine, this gets very tedious, and after a while, I wanted to absolutely throw my Switch across the room. It was cool to see all the recipes that you could create, but I seriously think it'd been a lot better if there was some type of in-game catalog or cookbook that you could go off of instead of having to look everything up online. I couldn't imagine trying to figure all these out by myself without a guide. I genuinely think it'd be impossible. I mean, I'd be looking like Charlie Day trying to figure out all the things that I've mixed together and which items that I have and have not tried to mix together yet. It'd be an absolute mess. But I will say the gold badge is really cool to have, and it's like a symbol of completing the game all the way through and experiencing everything that it has to offer. But overall, I will say the post-game of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door is honestly the only part I feel like in the entire game where I felt a disconnect. The only part where I would have to take off points for how much fun I had, and it just really brought the game to a drag, as if the developers didn't really have anything else they wanted you to do and really just try to drip feed any boring side quest and extra challenge that you could possibly do, like making recipes. 58 different recipes. So hopefully when it comes to 100% completing the next Paper Mario game and having fun post-game content, it actually has fun post-game content. One of the last sections I want to talk about is the music, because it's so important to me in gaming. I feel like I've always have to talk about how good is a game's music. And the music overall is a major upgrade from the original, which is already amazing. And it's really hard to believe that there's some people out there that feel like it's not that good compared to the original. I genuinely don't understand it. If anything, every track has just added instruments in a bigger, more bombastic approach, really hammering in that brand new orchestrated soundtrack, and you can hear every single instrument. It has a little taste of the Origami King in there with a little bit of trumpets and horns tooting. It's definitely a positive because Origami King has a stellar soundtrack, and I am glad to say that Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door definitely rivals that game. It is a beautiful soundtrack, and I just want to go over some of the music pieces that I definitely enjoyed the most. Rogueport sounds great and adds a sense of wonder. I've seen some people online say it's a little too much for a city that's kind of in the slumps and the dumps and trash, and I don't understand this. It's meant to be the start of your journey. Yes, it still has that feeling of a dirty city, but still it's just more in your face, and it's bright and beautiful, and it feels really impactful as you start your journey. It's amazing. I also talked about how new themes were added and remixes of current themes that were stretched longer. For instance, there's 3 different sub-levels. For the lower you go into the actual sewers, the music will actually get louder and more music instruments will actually play as you get closer to the Thousand Year Door. So much so, sub-level 3 sounds like this. It's genuinely one of the greatest songs in the entire game. Nintendo also knew exactly what they were doing using Petal Meadows as one of the first themes we've ever heard with the reveal trailer, which is just an absolutely beautiful remix and perfectly orchestrates the beginning of a big journey. Magnus von Grappel's theme has been shifted into overdrive with even more mechanical moving parts, and it's just so good with its new extension towards the end of the song as well. It actually doesn't feel as short and loopy as it did originally. And Duplis' boss battle theme is known for being one of the best boss battle themes in the entire Mario series, and I'm not gonna lie, they made it even better, because it still was relatively on the short side, and they added a whole extra section which wraps around beautifully when it comes to the loop. I also feel like the remake made some songs just infinitely better. I never was a huge fan of Key Hall Key's theme before, it was just pretty simple, but some new added tones and shifts to the song actually made me really enjoy it the entire time, even through the back and forth fetch quests. Like I said, it had some Origami King rock vibes to some of the soundtracks that just fit perfectly with some of these boss battles. Like Macho Grubba in Cortez, it just sounds almost too perfect. Hearing the electric guitar and the drums playing at the beginning of the Cortez boss theme is just a great addition. also new music for all scenes and duplicated boss battles that are repetitive throughout the entire game, so they made new soundtracks. For instance, all the dragons have different soundtracks that are slightly different variations of Hooktail's theme, and that even goes for Magnus von Grapple version 2, which has a new moon-based techno version, which is so good. And at the very end of the game when the crystal stars gather, come on. I mean, an already amazing theme just done up even better. Something else this game does is it adds new versions of the battle theme as well. This was actually stripped straight from Origami King, so every battle theme from each chapter sounds different. And this was kind of a hit or miss. There were some themes I definitely did not love as much, but there were definitely some that I loved a lot more than the regular version, such as the Glitz Pit battle theme, which actually feels like the crowd's amping you on in the middle of a boxing match. It is a perfect fit. In the battle theme in Chapter 6, when you reach the Sunset Express, especially if you get attacked first, it's actually like a retro, old classic time theme for a train, and just, I don't know, it fits perfect, and I can't even explain how this feels, but just listen. Of course, there's added boss themes for the two new bosses being Waka and Prince Mush, and I personally love the latter. Out of all the songs I heard throughout the game, there was only a couple of remixes that I still would probably prefer the original. For instance, the Hooktail boss theme just sounded a little weird now. It had some new riff or tone to it that I kept hearing, and I just didn't like it as much as the original. And some were a little too much in the positive direction. For instance, Twilight Town sounds a little bit too ambitious compared to its super gloomy charm that it originally sounded like. with me saying that, it is still an extreme nitpick considering the fact that it could just be me and my taste with that new theme, but overall, even those are still amazing, stellar soundtracks, and that tells you how good this game's soundtrack is. I think my other complaints are really just nostalgic based because there's two complaints that I want to make, and one was the X-Naut theme that would play when you had to chase down Lord Crump and the bomb from the Great Boggly Tree in Chapter 2. It played that really cool theme from the X-Nauts that I enjoyed, and it felt more fast paced, and it was kind of throwing me off when I got that new soundtrack that played. Not that it's bad, it was kind of nostalgia bitten and missed that theme. But I think I definitely felt it even more at the end of Chapter 5, when you team up with Cortez and his members on the pirate ship in order to take out Lord Crump's pirate ship. It felt like one big pirate battle, and the Cortez boss theme fit perfectly here. And then they just replaced it with a new theme that kind of sounded a little corny and kind of took me out the moment a little bit. Once again, it could be nostalgia, maybe it's just me, but that's how I felt in the moment. But overall, I personally felt like the soundtrack was a huge step in a positive direction. Almost every single theme was definitely an upgrade with this new orchestral soundtrack, and I really find it hard to believe that some people genuinely don't like this version of the music. And honestly, if you don't like it though, the best part is there's a badge in the game for literally 1 coin that you can buy that will give you all the classic tunes. So honestly, I see it as a win-win. Definitely no negative here, if anything, a huge positive. The soundtrack was amazing. "20 years ago, Nintendo gave us a Mario RPG like no other. It has shaped my whole foundation around RPGs today, allowed me to expand on my horizons of the types of RPGs that I play that aren't even from Nintendo. It's also been a game that shaped my childhood, and it was a game that at the time I never knew would be such importance to the actual Paper Mario universe right now. Right now, more than ever, we needed this game. This game gave us hope in a new direction that Paper Mario could be going in. A direction, instead of moving forward, in fact, moving backward, giving us exactly what we wanted in the past by just expanding on what made Paper Mario so great in the first place. A simple, turn-based RPG with Mario and partners in hand is enough to get people to smile. Where the game is still a little rough around the edges when it comes to world design, being mainly linear, moving left to right, and also a pretty lackluster post-game, the game is still full of amazing combat, fun boss battles, intriguing enemies, and fun partner characters and NPCs to talk to, not to mention amazing worlds with great stories built in each and every single one of them that all tie into an amazing overarching story and a fantastic ending to an amazing Mario RPG adventure. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is a game that I will never forget, and thanks to Nintendo, in the year 2024 on our Nintendo Switches, everyone can now enjoy this game, even today, 20 years later. Thank you, Nintendo, for once again allowing us to experience a piece of our childhoods and what is still today the best Mario RPG.